Okay, good morning again. Today we're going to talk about building a report. So, welcome to the call. Let me actually put that down. And so, our agenda today is we're going to talk about what's behind reports, behind all things in a database are tables and fields. So, we'll talk about those. We'll talk about actually building a report. So kind of the basics of using Report Builder, where you find it, how you add fields. Then we will talk about using filters. And then I will also give you some tips on good reporting and just kind of like techniques that keeping your system clean, that kind of a thing. So behind all forms are tables and fields. Hopefully everybody kind of knows that, but all databases all over the world are made up of tables and fields. So it's important to know that in SAM. Tables are going to be the structure, but they also give hierarchy and relationship to the system. So it is how certain things relate. So cases come up underneath the family, and home studies, you can have multiple home studies or multiple licenses or background checks per case. So it's nice to know that structure, that hierarchy of things. Let's see, jump in here. Oops. And then fields contain a single piece of data for your record. So fields are what you guys are interacting with most of the time, which is a date field of some sort. You might have a name. All of that information is done on report or in fields. So fields are what you are going to also display on the report. It's our different columns that we'll see on the report, and it's what's giving us information. So then we will talk about setting up a report. So in SAM, under settings, there's a link called Report Builder. So I'm gonna let's talk about this first. So Report Builder is going to show you a list of every report that's in your system today. I am going to talk about building a report from scratch. So I'm going to talk about creating a brand new report, which is a link here on the sidebar. The other option is create new report from existing, which then I would select one of the many reports that are available to me as a way to get a head start on things. If I use that option, it will copy all of the columns that are already chosen on that report, and it will, I believe it'll also copy the filters. The reason you might do that is to change the filters. So instead of having all families, I might have a subset of families or a subset of children, or even, maybe looking at background checks that are about to expire so that we can stay ahead of the game. That kind of a thing is why you would have different variations of the same report. So for today, though, we're going to talk about creating a brand new report. The first thing we'll do is name the report. And I think the most important thing when you set up a report is to understand, like, what's the purpose of the report. And that seems really commonplace, but the next screen and the next things I'll talk about are going to make that really important. Of course, today, this is our webinar, building a report. So we don't actually have a huge purpose except for training on this. So I'm just going to use kind of simple things. The report hint in the memo, I think a lot of times people skip right on over these memo sections, but adding more descriptive of who's using it, who the report is for, and more general purpose than just kind of a trimmed up name is really helpful for other people that are working in your system and are administering reports, so that it can just be communicated to them what's going on. Otherwise, I think sometimes I look in people's sites and we're like, nobody knows what this report is for, and we'll let it go, which maybe it's a really important report, but we have no clue because it doesn't appear that anybody's using it. Okay, so having some memos and hints are going to be real helpful. The next thing that you'll do is choose a base entity type for the report. And so this goes back to the purpose of, like, Who is this report about? What are you trying to pull? In my demo site, I've got mainly information under the adopted family, so that's what I'll pull today. But you have lots of options. This should show for entity types that are enabled in your site. Because not every agency has the exact same data points. Some of these options may not be available for you. That's just because you're not really using that. So I'm going to choose the family. And from here, when you're building a report, you're going to need to know what are you talking about? What are you looking for? So we need to choose the table. So one of the things that I see happening a lot is someone will pull all kinds of things going on in here. This makes the report heavy. It also just clouds things up. So it's not necessary, in my opinion. Less is more. So being really focused on what we're talking about. And again, just reiterating the whole purpose of the report. For people who are unfamiliar with what table to use, a lot of information is stored on the case tables because that's kind of the umbrella of the service that you're providing for that client record type. So a lot is used there. There are supplemental tables like the adoption or placements or home studies or licenses that are often utilized because that is, again, really process heavy sections of the system. And I think that a lot of people are using that. If you are, though, looking for information very specific about parent education or about background checks or communications, you will really only need to select that table. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like if we choose too many one-to-many tables together. I did just throw out another term, which I assume people are familiar with, but maybe not. So one-to-many tables are tables, or they can also be called multi-record in our guides, in our SAM terminology. And these are tables that are useful for supplemental information, like when you have multiple records of something. Love that we use the same term in defining the term. So that makes things really not helpful. But when you think about information that you are collecting that ends with an S, right? So if it is plural in any way, a lot of times that's going to be information that's stored on a multi-record table. So thinking about background checks, we're having one background check record for each person in the home, so there might be more than one. Communications, right? You can have hundreds of data points for communications for a record. You might have lots of parent education records. Trying to think, counseling notes or case notes or other things. Most tables in the system are multi-record. There are some like, what is it called here? App 1 details, App 2 details. These tables are more detailed information for like demographics about parent 1 and parent 2 in the home. And you may or may not be utilizing those, but that is something that's, if, I don't know, my height changes because I've done a lot of Pilates this week, and I'm going to replace that information from 5'1" to 5'2", I'm going to overwrite that kind of a thing. That's why you would, the differences in reports. But again, most things are multi-record. So let's go back to creating this report. I'm going to base this. I'm going to include a couple of tables here, but I'm not going to go crazy. I'm going to choose the family tables already chosen. I've got case, and then I'm going to pull in the home study table as well. Once I've chosen my tables, and press save. From here, I'm going to start adding fields to the report because Sam doesn't know what columns that I actually want to pull. Always go back to what is the purpose. In my opinion, less is more, like I've already said, but I like to really iterate that. I see a lot of reports that you really have to scroll to the right in order to view the information over there. And depending on the purpose of that report, it may just be too much information that's being gathered there. So really trimmed, kind of 10, 15 columns or less is ideal for actually understanding what's going on with the report. I'm going to choose the name though, like who are we talking about, what family. I'm going to go ahead and just pop in state. So right here, I'm choosing which fields do I want. And it's really just checkbox lists or check boxes that I'll make a check on. Press save. So here up at the top of the report builder, now that I'm taken into that screen, is going to be, this is my report preview, which are the different columns that I have. I'm hovering over this and you can see that it says family dash name. So that's the table and then the field name. Okay, just so that you're aware of that. It's changing to family dash state. If I want to add more reports, I'll go to the, or rather more fields, I'll go to the sidebar and click to add more fields. I'm going to be taken back to where I select what table am I generating fields from. And I'm going to choose some fields off the case. I'm going to put in case close date, the reason, program, the case stage. I'm just going to choose some different things here. Where is my application date? And I will choose inquiry date, case close date, and I'm going to do a timeline date. That'll work. And then I'm going to do this one more time so you can really only choose from one table at a time. And I'm going to add some home study fields on here. So I'll do the agency, completed date, start date, the stage. I'm going to actually take that off. So if I don't want fields, I guess this is another thing to talk about, I can just uncheck those. This is one way of doing it. And I'll put the worker on here. And then that's good. Press save. So this is my report. Again, here are my columns. I'm reaching the max of the number of columns that I'd really recommend for a report. But what I want to do is just take a peek and actually open the report and see what it tells me. So this doesn't tell me a whole lot, to be honest. You know, it's just information here. I've got 250 families, and here's kind of all the information that I've selected about them. Each of these columns can be, we can, to modify how this report looks like. If I decided I don't really need case closed reason on this report because I'm not talking about the reason this report is why the families are closing. I might click on the column heading and then click to remove this field. So other ways just to modify your report can be done through that. The other thing that we could do is put this report in a bit of better order. So maybe I want to move the inquiry receive date, move field after the state region, so it'll be in more chronological order here for these three columns. Maybe I'll do the same and move this field after the case close date. Okay, so kind of moving things around. To access the report builder again, I can click options, edit this report. Okay. From here, I'm going to jump back. And how do I get this back up? Let's pull this up here. Now we'll talk about default filters. So again, because that one report, it's information, but it's not super helpful. Default filters will come into play to put some context to the report. So you might have default filters that say, I'm looking for all families in a particular state, or all families in a particular country, or program rather, or all families that have applied in the last month. something like that. And so now I've got a little bit more structure, I guess, to the report. It's already telling me something when I have a purpose to my report. So default filters are every time you open this report, it's how that report is going to be filtered. So let's, can I page on? Let's escape out of here. Oops. Escape out of here and go back to the report builder. So in the report builder, the default filters are added here in this filter section. Okay. Then you can click add or edit rather. And then I'm always again going to be selecting table. I've got only selections here for the tables that are on this report. So it is quite possible to add filters from a table that is not actually displayed on the report as far as a column heading. So we might not get that information, but maybe I definitely want to see families that have communication records, because then I know I've actually interacted with these families, but I don't actually pull any communications fields on the report because I don't really care what I'm saying. I just want to know that I've said something. That could be totally applicable. We'd need to add the table to this report in order to do that. But for simplicity's sake, let's just pull something about the case. Let's do case program country, and we'll do from the United States. Okay, so this is my default filter, and I think my original report, which is over here, nope, it's already gone. That's quite all right. It had like 250 families on it. Here, if I open this report, I'm down to 97 families. Okay. So I've trimmed down. At this point in time, I might also say this is families in the program, United States program or domestic program, right? If that is what I was doing. If I jump back to my report builder, I want to talk about something else about filters, which is if I add an additional filter, I get this option of, do I want the results to match all filters or any or some? And so I want you to see the difference between those. I'm going to do case stage equals application. And I'm going to at first choose it must match all or an and filter, right? Our operator. So this is going to be all families in the United States country program that are also in the application case stage. Okay, so it's just further narrowing my report. As a counter to that, is to use this or filter, must match any or some. And if I save that now and open this report, I'm going to have more families because now I've opened it up. It's great if I have families in the United States program or if they're in the application. And so in this case right here, these Billy Joel here, Lisa Jackson, neither of these families have a case program or country, but they are in the application stage. Also, this family here is in the United States, but they are not in the application case stage, right? So they're in a different case stage, but they are. So they match one of the two. Does that make sense? And just, I think most people have themselves kind of muted, but curious if there is any questions on that kind of filter. I'm keeping it pretty high level because everybody's reports will be very different, but just the difference of that is just kind of really, and is going to really hyper narrow your results. Anyways, or is going to open things back up a little bit. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. The other thing here is then report filters. So make it look pretty here. Report filters are those that are going to narrow your results for a specific purpose. So you might have this report that we've been looking at that is all families in the United States program or in the application stage. but maybe I want to find a little smaller subset for a very specific purpose. So this report's not going to be saved necessarily. It's just for this kind of one-time use, right? Let's jump back here. So if I open up this report, I might say, cool, well, this family is in the application stage, but I really want to look at professional services. So a couple ways to do filters on report are to click on the field value like I showed you. You might also click on the column and you can do a filter. So I could filter out blank or entered or search by this field. Searching by this field, we might say where equals Brazil. I think that was an option right there. And so we're narrowed down to one family. I'm going to go into default here. Default removes all those report filters. So once I've kind of played with some filters on the report specifically, default will always bring us back, in this case, to our default filters, which are program as United States and case stage or application stage. Okay. Filtering out blank or entered values. So if I move out all the entered values, I can see the couple of families, this two that I mentioned before, that don't have anything in case program. This is a really helpful option just for seeing maybe records that haven't been entered yet or where there's data entry inaccuracies. Okay, especially in this situation, we've got case stages application, but this family doesn't have the application receive date entered. So that might be nice to kind of do a little cleanup of data, something like that, to get information into the system. Click back to default. Okay, I think that's it for filtering that I want to talk about right there on the report. Is really just going to be blank or entered values, searching by the specific field for a very specific column, or by clicking on specific values, which here you can filter to get only domestic, or you could exclude domestic from that as another way to filter. The other thing would be to use search here. So we might use search and say, I want to find where the home study approved date is not empty. I don't know that I'm going to get any records on this, but this here, the search allows me to pull from any of the tables and let me say it like this, any fields from any of the tables that are on the report. So I can get really very specific without having to see that field and column on the report. And we do. So what did I do by the home study approved date? I think that field is not on here. If I add a field here, I'm going to pull that field onto the report. There it is. And we'll see that all of these records have a value there. Let me take a step back. I talked about, let me check my time too. Reports. One thing that I wanted to say is these multi-record tables. So in this case, I have the case table, which is kind of a multi-record table, and then I have home studies. You can see in this one record here, let me just filter by this record, they've got 2 home study records. So you may or may not want that for your report. Like, again, based on your report purpose, that may or may not be helpful information. Sometimes multi-records, we only want the current latest. That's really helpful for big processes like the home study or the license or potentially the adoption or potentially the current placement, depending on like if you're looking at it from a child's view. The current placement, which is where they are located at today, might be really helpful. Again, sometimes it might be really helpful to see all that youth's placements, or looking at placements from a family side, looking at the current placement may not actually mean anything, right? Because they might have 4 current placements happening. So there are ways to set the current record so that your agency can define how that is. That's not really the topic of today. I just wanted you to know that that's how this displays if you have multi-records. I wish I knew the name of my report. This is going to move us right into other things. Here, let me go back to presenting here. So other things that we'll talk about are just some report tips, because we're running out of my time and I wanted to have time for you to talk. Under settings in Report Builder, ways that you can find reports, okay? Because there are hundreds of reports in the system that come by default when you get it on day 1 versus you've been creating reports for years, is to come in here and use these 2 toggles at the top, or drop-down list, to select, like, I'm really talking about the adoption, and now I don't have to look at all those hundreds of reports. I'm narrowed down to these top 6 or 7 reports that are here. Then I could choose by specific fields. Maybe I'm looking for the adoption status, and this is the only report that this is on. Okay. If I open this report, I'm going to open it here. Another way to find reports, if you wanted to look at case program, you might be on the field properties screen. And at the bottom of the field properties screen, which is available for every field in the system, is a section that talks about reports used on. And so this specific field is used on all of these reports, and all of these are links that I could open up and look at that report, and I can see whatever the field was, one of these 3 is used here on this report. Okay. Let's see. Other things is just keeping your site organized. Again, if there is no memo to your report and it doesn't appear that anybody's modified that report in the last X years and nobody seems to be opening the report and nobody knows what to do with this report, sometimes it needs to be dumped. And that is okay, because you can always recreate the report. Making things useful for your team is part of it, right? Like, you have to clean up every springtime, clean out your house, kind of dust things out. That's totally appropriate to do with your database as well, especially if you've been using it for years. Other report tips are thinking about the report menu. So, couple ways that you can add report menus and make it useful for your team. On every tab, there is a section for report menu. So you can develop this to be reports that are all about the family, that are commonly accessed. This is great for team meeting reports. You know, once you guys have determined what your default filters are going to be, and it's like people are in their own offices or out of the office, like depending on how you're structured, having a common report menu and being like, we're going to the family inquiries report, clicking on, then we can find that. So everybody's literally looking at the same thing. Yeah, I think that those report menus are important. The other thing would be to build report menus for new users to your site. You can do that from settings, report menu builder. And this is just choosing, I'm going to edit an existing report menu so that you can see. This is choosing some reports that will be shown on that user's homepage, right? So I could go to this adoption executive report and I've got these, 17 reports. And if I offer this when I'm setting up someone's permissions for accessing SAM, I can give them this report menu. That means when they log in on the home screen, it will initially show those reports here. So they're kind of set up ready to go with things that you want to talk to them about on a regular basis, or that they need to be in the know about. And that, I believe, is it. I would love, we've got no minutes, but if you guys have any questions about reports, to talk to me about it for just a few minutes. If you've got another 5 minutes, does anybody have any like super pressing questions about reports that we can tackle? Okay, well then I am going to then call it for today. I appreciate you guys joining. My next webinar will be on report stats, which are even more beneficial and helpful once you've got reports set up, for helping you not only filter, but actually read information off. So how many records in this table of 200, or this report of 250 families, are in specific programs or case stages or states or whatever types of information you're looking for, and how does that break out percentage wise, things like that. But you can also use them to filter the reports. So they're incredibly helpful to just add on to your report building knowledge. If you guys have questions afterwards and you think of them, you're welcome to send those out to support. Otherwise, we will talk to you soon. Take care.
You are the last part.